welcome everybody to tonight's presentation. Tonight we're going to be presenting Tally Saves the Internet. Tally is a little pink blob. She's here to fight data trackers on the internet. And she's a friendly blob that lives in the corner of your screen, and she'll be presented by her inventors tonight. UCSD own alumni we're very proud of, Joelle, Dietrick, and Owen Mundy. So they'll be presenting tonight the project itself, Tally Saves the Internet, and they'll be doing a workshop later on. So let me introduce Joelle and Owen. Joelle is an artist who produces work about wanderlust and the human impact of global trade. She has done paintings, drawings, and animations that have been shown all over the United States, Mexico, Europe. And Owen Mundy is an artist, designer, and programmer. And his research investigates public space, information security, and big data. And his works have been presented also online, been reviewed in major magazines, been presented in museums and galleries all over the United States, Mexico, and in Europe. And together they form Sneakaway Studio. Sneakaway Studio builds online interventions, animations, and mobile apps to reimagine a more sustainable and equitable digital future. Concerned about the unintended consequences of automated systems, their creations break apart and reconfigure existing structures to build awareness of the internet's underbelly. Selected exhibitions and commissions of their collaborative include North Carolina State, Locust Projects in Miami, Drexel University in Philadelphia, Art Center Nabi in Seoul, Transitio MX in Mexico City, the Tina B Festival in Prague and Venice, the University of Florida, and the University of Texas. And they've received support from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Mellon Foundation, the Polak Krasner Foundation, UC Berkeley's Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity, the DAAD, and Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program. At Davidson College in North Carolina, Dietrick's an assistant professor of art and digital studies, and Mundy is an associate professor of practice in digital studies. So we are very honored to have this pair with such a eclectic and varied and impressive record. And so thanks very much and welcome everybody. Please give a big round of applause for Joelle, Dietrick, and Owen Mundy.
All right, thanks, Amy. Welcome, everyone. Like Amy said, we're Sneakaway Studio from Davidson, North Carolina. And before I tell you a little about our project, Tally Saves the Internet, I just wanted to thank the people that invite us to do this event, namely Amy Alexander, Trish Stone from Gallery QI, and others at Qualcomm Institute. We're excited to be here, especially because it gives us a chance to reconnect to the UCSD community. Owen and I met at UCSD during our graduate program, and we worked with many beloved artists as activists like Barbara Kruger, Louis Hawk, Lev Manovich, and of course your own professor, Amy Alexander. So we're really happy to be here. So Owen and I finished our MFAs at UCSD in 2009 and 2006 respectively. And immediately we found teaching positions at Florida State University, but we kept on making art. When we make games, Owen and I use the name Sneakaway Studio. Here's a drawing of our family made in the Netherlands by Rafaela Wang during the 2014 International Documentary Film Festival, also known as IDFA. That year, Owen had won an award for his online project, I Know Where Your Cat Lives. And before the festival, they asked him if they could use his recent Google searches for an artist to make this drawing. And indeed, we have a daughter for which at the time we were buying robots and a window of exactly those measurements. So what do? We make work about contemporary technology and its automated systems. Sometimes the works are generative, driven by code to create infinite possibilities, like these two pieces at Drexel University and Philadelphia. Other projects take the form of prints, videos, and games. While we collaborate, we also develop individual bodies of work. As the largest keyword at the top of Owen's website suggests, code has long been at the center of Owen's practice, and painting has been at the center of mine. So our most recent collaboration is what we came here to talk about. So I'm just going to give you sort of an overview, a little bit about the history surrounding it, and then Owen's going to do a workshop about how we actually made the thing. So Tally Saves the Internet is a browser extension that transforms data that advertisers collect into a multiplayer game. Once installed, a friendly pink blob, this little creature over here with 2 eyes, lives in the corner of your screen and warns you when companies translate your human experiences into free behavioral data. So I think we've all had the experience where you're like shopping for a tent or something online, and then next thing you know, there's like tents popping up all over like every web page that you load. So Tally encounters product monsters, and they represent online trackers and their corresponding product marketing categories. So you can capture them in a turn-based battle, sort of Pokemon style, transforming the game into a progressive tracker blocker, where you earn the right to be let alone through this playful experience. Here's the core game loop. So first, you browse the web as you normally would. Then second, you find monsters. Third, you battle the monsters. And if you beat the monster, you explode the current web page and block that tracker. So here's a 3-minute video. I won't play the whole thing, just to show you how the game works in action. So here we're seeing the game explored as a player named given keyboard 15. You can see Tally in the corner. She's turned orange, so she detected a monster. And then when you load the page again, she sees the monster. You click on the monster, and then she battles the monster. And so you can see at the bottom that you can choose attacks that are in orange and defenses in blue. And all of the attacks and defenses play with the lingo of data valence. So you can see here the words microtransactions and triangulate. Those are all methods that the advertisers use to figure out your identity and your interests so that they can target you with ads. So here's another example. You can see Tally is on Dzine. And sure enough, there's a design monster on the page. Sometimes you have to scroll to actually find the monsters. So she's scrolling, and then clicks on it, and that launches the battle. And you can see it's the same group of attacks, but the more you play, the more attacks you earn. So you can change out the attacks, and that's part of the strategy. So this game takes the entire web on it as its canvas, essentially. And that's incredibly ambitious, but we're hoping that more people get to experience it, and also it transforms the player's online experience in a way that it helps them to remember that, one, everything about our current online experience is human-made, and two, it can vastly be improved so that it promotes healthier ways of being. The game is multiplayer so that you can see patterns in your online activity and the activities of other players, seeing all as the advertisers do on the game's leaderboard. And the leaderboard, you can also check out the other players' names and activities. Tally's anonymous generator ensures lively player names like Unlikely Scroller 68 or Selfish Value 14. It also keeps us from knowing who you are, but it links your data up so that you can see the gameplay. If you go to the profile, you can see your stats, as well as the badges and consumables that you've collected. For example, you can earn the big clicker or the long distance scroller badge, both of which references how trackers collect your physical actions, or the FOMO badge, which you can earn for using websites that employ such psychological manipulation. At the bottom, below your attacks and defenses, is a pie chart with product marketing categories to give you a sense of how the algorithms match you to advertisements. And we also created this generative video that show the product monsters, and we use it in exhibitions to show the game. Each monster represents a category in the Interactive Advertising Bureau's IAB's product classification taxonomy. This is a standard that's used across the internet for real-time bidding auctions. And these auctions automatically occur every time you load a page. And they determine what ads you'll see. To make the monsters, we downloaded this taxonomy and used it as a conceptual framework. So now the taxonomy ID is now called an MID, or a monster ID. And we added game data that you can see in the bottom left. So in this case, events and attractions, the tier 1 category. Tier 2 is, here it is, party supplies and decorations. And this is the wedding monster. Wedding monster and the birth monster. Then you can see all the advertising keywords that we generated so that we can match people's searches to the actual monsters. So here's the actual taxonomy that I mentioned with the 700 categories. They published this spreadsheet with bidding data on GitHub, so it's actually kind of fascinating. And for each of these parent categories, we developed unique color palettes based on marketing and branding trends in each of the fields. We also have a spreadsheet for the other game assets like attacks, badges, and dialogue. Many of these were developed using the lingo of data valence. They were inspired by books on the topic, like Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff's 2019 book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. So one of Tally's goals is to familiarize players with the techniques of surveillance capitalism. So our thought was that if they can name it, they can understand the system. And if they can understand the current system, they can push for change. Another way to push for change is to explode existing structures and imagine new ones. Consequently, one of the core game mechanics allows you to explode the architecture of any web page. You can find out more about that game mechanic in volume 2 of the Signer Culture Cookbook. It's on GitHub, and it's also part of the workshop today. So Tally Saves the Internet is a massive project that would have not been possible without the help of many people and organizations, which are listed on our credit page. We worked on it for years, but there were students that would come on like different summers, and you can see the institutional support. We were really excited to have UC Berkeley support us, get support from their Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. So this May we'll push a new update with more monsters, like probably about 50 monsters. And in June we'll exhibit Tally at the 22 Isaiah conference in Barcelona, Spain. So I thought I'd leave you with the Tally's trailer, and I hope to see you online blocking trackers, and that will give Owen a chance to get set up with his workshop.
The internet is a real marvel. But it also feels wrong. Everywhere you go, you are being watched. And once they have your data, They'll use it to convince you what to buy. How to feel. And even how to vote. It's hard to keep your data safe, but don't lose hope. There's a way to stop them, and it's up to you. By installing Tally in your browser, you can battle the trackers, and you can stop them from using your data against you. It's time. It's time to save the internet. Download Tally today.
All right, so I went through that rather quickly. That the thing that popped up at the end is this thing called the Tally Tracker Explorer that we've created with North Carolina State University for their visualization studio, which visualizes all the people playing Tally at one time in this cycloramic visualization studio. So that's in the works, probably going to be launched next fall. But anyhow, I forgot we're doing a Q&A, so maybe we could go ahead and do that now.
All right. Thank you so much, Joelle. That was awesome. So yes, everybody, if you have any questions for Joelle, you can enter your questions in the Q&A feature. So I'll start us off. I'm very intrigued by this project, as I am, with so many projects that address surveillance in different ways, because there's usually kind of two schools of thought, I think, in surveillance art. One is the fighting back, the direct fighting back, stopping the surveillance, and the other is, as you put it, naming it, right? So trying to deconstruct it, trying to basically make the surveillance more understandable, less scary, so that people have a way in to addressing it. And it seems like you're doing both, right? You have a thing that is blocking the cookies and or trackers, and then you're also illustrating this taxonomy. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think about that, or if I've misunderstood anything in how the project functions.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. It's funny, Amy, I was just showing one of our colleagues, an contemporary art historian here, John Corso Esquivel, your Sven piece. I just think it's so good as far as like playing with surveillance, and the sense of humor is so, I think that's what it gives people an entry point. Like I feel like people have grown a little weary about talking about data privacy. So us making something that was as playful as Tally was very purposeful. And we do like the fact that it is utilitarian, that it actually does block trackers. But yeah, so it does. You're spot on. It does both of those things. Yeah. Did you want to add something?
I'm in the room too.
Go ahead. Yes, hi, Owen.
Because I have to do the second part of the presentation. And
do you want to jump on and say anything
I think that's a really great observation, Amy, to look at the whole kind of range of work about surveillance and and to put it in these kind of two camps, and one is kind of like a, the utility side, right? Or has some kind of utility, or does something that actually has some kind of effect on it. And I'm not in the camera. And then the other one is the side that is, there's the education piece, there's humor, there's aesthetics. It in some ways it kind of describes how Joelle and I often fit together. And so I think so. I think Tally reflects both of those, because that's actually our approach. So I think that's a really great observation.
And Owen teaches a class on surveillance, so I mean, you could give concrete examples like the demetricator one, or I mean, there's so many.
Sure, Ben Grosser's demetricators are a really great one. The one I always think about in terms of the utility, the works that have utility, the one that I always go to is the social media, what's it called? I forgot the name of it. Web 2.0 suicide machine.
Yes.
I think is the full name, and which means I have to explain what the Web 2.0 used to mean.
True.
But in short, it was an app that deleted your account, and you committed social media suicide because you deleted your account. So you're not, your virtual avatar is gone. But it actually did something. It was effective enough, not just in kind of a cultural, artistic sense, but in society to get cease and desist letters. That to me always seems like a bar. If you can get a cease and desist letter, you're somehow doing something right.
Let's not go there.
All right. Well, we could talk a lot, you and I, about cease and desist letters, but we have a few questions coming in. I've had a few in my time. We've got several questions coming in from the chat, which is great. So let's see. We've got one very good, great idea. I don't like being tracked online, and this extension seems very helpful. I'm wondering, however, do we always have to fight the monster in order to stop the tracking? Like, what if I'm busy and I don't have time to fight? Ha ha.
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge with Tally. I mean, I personally get distracted very easily, and I often can't have Tally on. But we have several different modes. So you can put her in stealth mode, so she's still like gaining points and giving you information about your tracking, and your tracking, and then can still block. You can only block the trackers if you battle. But I like this idea that she's like, there's a chill mode, then there's all the feels. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's different things you can do.
Yeah, but technically it's a progressive tracker blocker, and so you do have to earn it. And so we kind of dove into the world of games and tried to apply all of our kind of like, let's break it and then put it back together in weird ways to games and game mechanics, and that's kind of how Tally evolved. Because honestly, if you want to go and block trackers, there are a lot of really great apps to do that. There's Ghostry and Disconnect. We use the list of trackers, in fact, from the Disconnect project, which is open source. There's a side note or a footnote to that comment, which is that browser extensions, the world of browser extensions is about to change in the next year, because Google and Chrome is pushing the Manifest 3, which means that that ad blocking, tracker blocking is going to have to change in many ways. And so Tally will continue to work. Actually, Tally's tracker blocking is very low tech, and it will work in Manifest 3. But yeah, you do have to battle the monsters. That's that's the game.
Right. Yeah, so we're getting a few questions about gee, what are there already extensions that block trackers quietly, and how much of this is about awareness? And we have one question that says, have you noticed younger kids being interested in playing Tally? It seems like a great way to subtly teach kids about unethical data collection without them having to understand the more adult aspects of it all. So I wonder, maybe you can kind of bundle those together, because it seems like the awareness is just as important, or maybe more important, than the functional tracking in the piece. And how does this affect, how do you think about it in terms of different populations of users, from children to tech savvy people?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of the reasons that Tally looks the way she does and the way that she's constructed the way she is because of our daughter. Owen made the piece, I Know Where Your Cat Lives, and that was very much about him discovering that Instagram was collecting data on the photographs he was taking of our daughter in our backyard. And then with Tally, it's the same thing. Like Tally, Sophia loves to play video games. I mean, it's the way that she really takes in information. And so she thinks she's entertained by the product monsters, and she would come up with her own product monsters. So I do think it has an appeal to that age group. Yes. And I brought up this Learn More page because it's a really nice, we put this together as a resource of different things that people could read, or different our favorite cultural works about surveillance, and people to follow. So I think you're right. There's a range of ages that it's appeals to.
Okay. So we're getting a few questions about specifics, and I've got one of my own. So maybe we can bundle a few of these together. Questions about how tech savvy does someone have to be to play this? How do you increase Tally's stamina? Will it work with programs like CCleaner? And my question is, as you're playing it, are you, because there is a competition, right? Like there's a leaderboard, and like what I was wondering is, to do well on the leaderboard, do I have to, it seems like I have to block a lot of trackers. And so therefore it seems like maybe I have to, not already have something that is blocking trackers, and B, I have to be hanging out at some like really nosy site. Like if I'm hanging out at really nosy sites that are invading my privacy all the time, I would get rewarded because I could be blocking all of these trackers. But if I'm hanging out at cool sites that aren't blocking me to begin with, I'm not going to do as well in the game. So is there a perverse incentive / strategy I should know about?
So failing, you actually win if you're failing. Yeah, that's interesting. Dylan, do you want to take that one?
Well, it's a constant. It seems like in making surveillance work, there's a constant kind of battle, and we experience it multiple times. And I think in terms of making work about digital culture and issues with digital culture, but then using digital tools to make that work, you run into this same issue often, which is that we find that we're kind of asking ourselves, are we perpetuating the problem by asking someone to play this game where they become tracked in order to educate them about trackers? We had the conversation often about, are we encouraging people to use the internet, and when they really should just take a break and go outside and get some oxygen in their blood? And if you look at other works about surveillance, there's another kind of grouping similar to the one that Amy made earlier, which would be that there are works that are very respectful of users and their data to talk about issues of surveillance, and then there are works that are not respectful of users and their data.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I could reference Tim Schwartz and I collaborated on a project, and you helped on that one too, the Commodify Us, where we started with a manifesto first to say, okay, whatever we do, we're gonna establish some values about the work that we make, and we did this during the residency in Rotterdam, and the work, it reflected those values. But to bring it back to the original point, Joelle, help me.
I don't know. Amy, did that answer your question?
I feel like there were comments on the question instead of the answer to the question.
Yeah, maybe it's maybe the question is open-ended in its self. We got another practical question here. Does Tally eat a lot of CPU cycles?
No, Tally is pretty performant. Tally is 100% SVG and CSS3 animation. So most of the data is most of the activity is actually, and the processing happens on the server. But during the animations, like the explosion, if you're running a really if you're running a web page that has a lot of media and is using a lot of memory, then there won't be as much for Tally to use in the animations and the explosion and so forth. So no, if you go into DevTools and compare Tally to like your average YouTube page or any other kind of like, especially a page that has what's it called, like it just goes on and on, like a never-ending scroll page, you'll find Tally's just fine. And I remember, Amy, the original question, which was how do you do well in Tally, given the problems that you brought up, and the leaderboard is based on your XP, so it's so that includes the battles and monsters you defeat, but the primary points that you can get are from clicking. If you pay attention when you click, there are certain things that you can click that are worth more points. Incidentally, Stack Overflow voting up a Stack Overflow post will get you more points than the average click, and there are other little hidden moments like that. Yeah, so it's XP. It's not so much monster. So you could play the game and actually do great without ever beating a monster, although the tracker blocking feature wouldn't work.
Oh, so there's other components like voting up a Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
Wow. Is that an Easter egg? You're smiling like that's an Easter egg you've just revealed to us.
There are little Easter eggs.
Okay.
Yeah, there are several Easter eggs.
Oh, well, I mean, that's interesting too, because it's beyond this, just kind of this battling the negatives on the internet. You're also like supporting the positives. So I think that's a nice feature.
She also makes jokes too.
Oh yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
Here we go. So you can drag Tally around, and if you click Tally, then she might, it might prompt her to say something. If you double click her, then you can get a kind of menu and go through the story, tutorial, or even see a second menu. If you triple click her, then you get a joke. So here we go. Let's see what Tally. Oh, I was too slow. I'll try that again. Okay.
cracking ourselves up over here.
Okay, so we've got 5 more minutes for Q&A, and so I want to try to make sure we get to at least people that are not in my class, because I think we're gonna join my class a little later on. Question is 2 questions from the same person. How do I increase tally stamina, and will there be an interface that is easy to use for people who are not quite computer savvy?
Stamina. So if you take a break for 1 hour, and this is related to the earlier question, if you take a break for 1 hour and stop using the internet for an hour, then your stamina will reset. And that is our own like very specific Easter egg that addresses that question about you know, getting people off computers. And so yeah, so that's the easiest way. You can also find good cookies and good things on the internet. Occasionally you'll see that. The menu at the top, the pop-up, you know, it's not. I don't.
Chill.
Yeah. So here's the game modes. You could see. There are a couple of, you know, admin modes you can see here, but everybody you can see by default it's regular, and then chill is with you if you like having tally, but you if you find the sounds maybe distracting, and then stealth is just everything is she still runs, but she's not visible. You can also disable domains. There's feedback and. But yeah, so what advice would I give for making it more usable? Yeah, I think that we tried to keep it fairly simple. It was a hard game to build, I'm not gonna lie. Just because there are just all kinds of weird issues. Like, for example, if you go to a website and you know, Tally is built with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and if you go to a website, your browser extension will inherit the CSS and the styles from that website. So we have a long list of bug fixes that are just, you know, dealing with all the pollution that we experience on other people's websites, where we show up and they've like, you know, written sloppy code, and, you know, and all their SVGs are transparent for some reason, you know. But if you see any of those, then there's a feedback button, and you can report those in the report a bug section.
All right, thanks very much. So we should jump over now to the workshop portion, and then we'll have some more time for Q&A after that. So Owen, you're going to be presenting the workshop. Do I understand this correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So here we go. Owen Mundy is going to teach us how to make our very own tally, or make our very own browser extension, or save the internet.
So in 2019, we wrote an article, and we were, you know, testing game mechanics and, you know, trying to decide what it was like to have a browser extension kind of follow you around the internet and deal with trackers. And so we made an extension and wrote a chapter about it. It was published, as Joelle said, in the Signal Culture Cookbook, Volume 2. The PDF is linked from my website, and I think maybe Amy shared it with her class, but if not, it's easy to find. And so
I did share it with the class, but we may have attendees who are not in the class as well.
Oh, that's right.
Tonight, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Here, I'll dump this into the chat if you'd like to read it. Trying to click in there. There we go. And so, yeah, so this is the full chapter, and we introduce browser extensions and talk about data tracking. We talk about some of the kind of wonderful artistic extensions like Raphael Rosendale's abstract browsing, which transforms all the block level HTML elements into this kind of like Mondrian, is that the right artist?
Sure.
Yeah. This kind of like colorful, abstraction, and it doesn't really make the internet more usable, but it does make it kind of wonderful, and it gives you a temporary respite. Is that the right?
Mhm.
We still haven't figured out how to pronounce respite. I think it's respite. And so in the second part of the chapter, we talk about building browser extensions, and it starts with part 1 and goes through the process. And so this was written 3 years ago, and I've since learned a lot more about browser extensions, and I've mentored students as they build browser extensions in my class, and I built Tally, and so I rewrote this as a Manifest 3 browser extension because you can no longer publish browser extensions as Manifest 2. And so this presentation is here, it's online, and I'll post this as well if you'd like to reference it later and check out the code samples and actually go through it. And so this presentation is just makes an extension that destroys web pages that steal your data. So if it finds trackers, then it explodes, and it uses the same explode code and the same tracker finding code, but it's just that piece. And so it's a great introduction to extensions. If you've never built a browser extension, it's going to be a good introduction. So. Okay, so let's start with the basics. So browser extensions are software. And so when you add an extension, it adds features to the web browser. So the Wayback Machine that the Internet Archive publishes, if you have that running, it will show you what a web page looked like in the past, even if that web page was deleted. So if you get a 404 and the Internet Archive finds that there's a copy in there from the past, then it will show you that version or give you a link to that version. This one is called MeowMet, and it was published in 2015 at the Met by Emily McAllister. And if you open a new tab, it just pulls one image from their collection that has a cat in it. And the most popular types of, if you go to the Chrome Web Store or the Mozilla add-ons store, or whatever they call it, you'll find that the most popular ones are ad blockers and tracker blockers. And ad blockers have kind of morphed into tracker blockers, and they find other ways to kind of support their activity. Talking about how they speed up web pages, which is true, and how they only block annoying ads. I'm gonna put finger quotes around that word because that's, I think, subjective, because in my opinion, all ads are 100% annoying. Anytime someone is trying to persuade you to do something against your will, that feels pretty annoying, if you ask me. Okay, so let's talk about let's get to the process of building this thing. So we're going to talk about how they're used. Done. Check. We're going to create a basic hello world example and learn to debug extensions, which I think is one of the most important things you can do. And you'll see why. They're surprisingly complex. And if you get the complexity out of the way, then you're just writing JavaScript. And so then we'll access the content of the web pages. We'll work with the DOM and incorporate some JavaScript libraries, and then, as I said, we'll detect the ones that have hidden trackers on it. So first and foremost, like I said, everything is built. Everything that's on the web is built with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And if you're using an app like, I don't know, Slack, for example, or Atom, you're also using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, because these are actually just web apps that are wrapped up in another kind of framework, and so that they can publish them as executable applications on your computer. If you go into Slack or Atom and hit Command R, it'll refresh just like a real web page. And you can even go into the dev tools, which is somewhere in there, and look at it like it's a real web page. And so browser extensions are really no different than that. HTML, CSS, here's some samples on the right, and some links where you can go and learn about those. If those are new to you, then definitely spend some time. So the manifest file is a JSON file, JavaScript object notation, and it's pretty simple. It's another plain text file that has it's a hierarchical data format where it has a key and a value. And these 4 lines right here are really all you need to make an extension. Once you do this, then you have a browser extension, you can install it. And so you have the name, a description, a version, and then you set the manifest version. And I mentioned during the first part that we moved from manifest 2 to manifest 3. And so everything I'm going to cover in this demo covers manifest 3. And so manifest 2 mostly works, but there are all these weird changes, mostly which are about Google and Chrome trying to add security and privacy and legitimacy to browser extensions in the Chrome Web Store and all that. But also it's kind of a power grab, because it does change the way that currently ad blockers work, and it takes away a little bit of power from the ability for a browser extension to see what is being transmitted on network connections from a web connection in a browser. And so it's a little bit complicated, and it's all very new. And as of last month, you could no longer publish a version 2 manifest, and that's why I made the decision to move to 3. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate this, and I don't expect anybody to work along with me in real time, but you can, this is being recorded, and you can also, I've written this tutorial so you can reference it later, and so you can follow along later. So I'm just going to use my, the project repository, and I'm just going to make a brand new directory here, so I can kind of build it as someone might who's following this. So I'm just going to call it the UCSD 2022. And so when I am referencing the project folder, it's going to be UCSD 2022. Cool. So I'm going to make a new file, and it's manifest.json. And then I'm going to paste that in there. And that's really, like I said, that's all you need. So once I save this, I'll go into Chrome, and I'll go to the address chrome://extensions. And the second that you do that, then you are on your extensions page. You can also, anytime you are in your Chrome settings, then it's always going to be Chrome something, like Chrome settings, for example. And these are just other web pages. But on the Chrome extensions, once you tick developer mode over here on the top right, then you can load an unpacked extension. Unpacked just means it's in development. It hasn't been zipped up and prepared to be released. And so on Chrome, you just select the folder that has the manifest file, hit select, and presto, that extension has been loaded. And as it said on the in the JSON, my first browser extension, there's an emoji that tells us what the description, there's the version. We can see the details, but we can also see the ability to refresh that extension. Basically, it means it goes and looks at the files and looks and see if anything needs to be updated, and reloads it. And of course, you can toggle it on and off. So I've lost my, there we go. Yeah, so I just went through the Chrome or Chromium version of the process of loading an in development extension. Mozilla has their own. It's slightly different, but it's basically the same thing. And two things to note here. We're building a cross-browser extension. So everything that we're building here will work in Firefox or Chromium browsers. And I use the word Chromium because Chrome is a Chromium browser, just like Chrome and Brave and Opera and Edge. Even Microsoft Edge is a Chromium browser, which is really interesting when you look at the history of the browser wars. And it gets even more complicated if you look at mobile browsers, because on iOS, if you open up Firefox, if you download Firefox as the browser and run it, you're technically running Chromium. So on iOS, Mozilla Firefox is a Chromium browser. So the browser wars are a mess. Okay, so we loaded our first extension. We confirmed it's loaded. I talked about what packed and unpacked meant. And so now let's edit this. And I'll just go in and I'll just update a couple things and show how one updates a browser extension. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so we can see these better. And so I just updated from 1.10 to 1.11, and I'll pick a different emoji. And then once I hit save, then and go back to any test page, it hasn't changed. And there's no really way to change right now, but I'll just tell you it hasn't changed. You have to go in here, and you can still see it says 1.10. You have to come and hit refresh right there. And that is how you refresh a browser extension. And then you can go to the page where you're doing your work, and then you can hit refresh on that page. So the browser extension itself, the data has to be refreshed. And then all of the instances of the browser extension on all the pages that you have open, or the tabs, have to be refreshed as well. So it's a little bit of a pain, but there are tools to hot reload that. And yeah, so anyway, so as long as you know that going in, how that kind of works. Yeah, so okay, so we made a project folder, we made a manifest, that's our hello world. And so now we're going to start to add the architecture and learn how to debug it, and learn about how the pieces fit together under the hood. So browser extensions have these distinct contexts. And if you go through a tutorial, it'll immediately have you doing, a content script and a background script. And sometimes it explains what they are, but I find that one thing that gets really complicated is when I want, let's say I'm going to make a global variable, and I want to access it from all these different contexts. It's just not possible unless you actively communicate that data across these contexts, right? And so the data that these different contexts can access, and the methods that they can use, and the other different kinds of rules that govern their behavior are mainly due to security. So if you're running your JavaScript inside of the web page context or the content context, then you can access everything that a user does. You can add things to the screen, and so like tally, all the code that runs tally and the visual parts of tally are built in the content. So you can see, that data is something you can see, that it can access the page and write new code and new images to the page. And but it can't do things that the background can do. The background can communicate with the server. It can save data inside of cookies and the local storage. Content strip can't do that. And that adds complexity, because now if you want to capture a bit of data, like the number of times that you've clicked on Tally, or the number of times you've battled a monster, that data can't is in the content, and so you have to basically send that data to the background, and the background prepares, you know, a request to send to the server. So when you're doing browser extensions that have a server component, you're basically working with like 3 servers, because you have the content, the background, and the actual server. And then if you have an action, the page action is this other context. And that's when you click on the icons. All these are technically called actions. And so this context is its own separate world. And so if you want data, if you want the number of XP that the user has, you have to communicate with the background script. And so there's a lot of complexity here, but as long as you understand that they're in these separate kind of silos, and that there's a reason, it's security, and that if you you know that going in, then it's good. So we're going to start by adding a content script and a background script to the project, and then to the manifest. So, you know, the first thing we have to do is add the file, right? So we're going to add the background.js file, and we're going to add this code. It's just going to log some information, a string. And so in my project folder, I'll make a new file. I'm going to call it background.js. I'll paste that in there. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'll go ahead and do it before I talk a little bit more. I've already basically described what these 2 contexts can do. And this is going to be the content. And now I've saved them. Technically, the files are saved in the extension project folder, but they're not actually in the extension until you go to the manifest. And in the manifest, you need to update it to use special keys to reference the background and the content scripts. So I'll paste that in there. This is JSON, so it has to be comma delimited. So if I went and I hit return a few times and I pasted, there's going to be an error. That's not going to work. If I go and try to refresh the extension right now, Chrome is going to get angry at me, and it's because JSON has a kind of strict syntax, and the syntax is basically this: for every key value relationship, they have to be comma separated. And so here I violated that rule. And the second that I fix that rule and hit save and go back to Chrome and try to refresh, Chrome's happy. So yeah, so I've added a background, a key that points to the background. It's in Manifest 3, you have to use these things called service workers, which are basically little apps that are kind of running in the background. YouTube, every website has them now. And then you have the content scripts. And so the content scripts say, when the URL, you know, if I said New York Times, then it would only work on the New York Times. When the URL matches this string or this pattern that I give it, then load all the content scripts. And I've only got one in here right now, and it's, you know, it's the file that I'm pointing. So I'm using Atom, one of my favorite code editors. So Control-Option-B, beautifies, save, go back, refresh, and so now it's refresh, and now we have a background script, and I know it's working because I can see the service worker, and we have a content script. So let's go and look at these 2. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about how to debug these now, and I'm just gonna pull up a basic HTML page. Yes. And so I just made this. It has 3 hidden trackers on it, and some HTML. And if I open up the DevTools, then I can confirm that the content script is loaded. So one way to do that in a web browser is to right-click anywhere and say inspect. And by default, you usually get the web elements, and that shows you all the different, if you've been writing HTML and you don't know about DevTools, then I hope your mind is blown right now, because there's just no way in the world I could imagine doing this, doing that job without having access to all the data, including not just the markup, but also the CSS and the ability to come in here and to manipulate the data in real time. It's just, DevTools are awesome. So anyway, so those are the elements. The console is where we're mainly concerned. And the console is just like any other console. It's like a terminal. You can come in here and do math. You can actually, you can write JavaScript right in the, right inside of the console and execute it. And it's really great. And so I have logged hello from content.js from the content.js file, which I pulled in the content scripts, and there it is. And it's just a, it's just a hello world message. But it, it illustrates what's going on, which is that when you have a content script and a browser extension, it's injected in every page that the match lines up with. And as we saw in my manifest, I just said all URLs. So every web page that I go to now is going to have this content script, and it's going to log that, behind the scenes in the DevTools. And it's also going to do all the other wonderful code that I write in that content script. Okay, so that's the content script. What about the background script? Because we also have that console.log in there. So let's go back to the Chrome extensions page. And you notice that I have this inspect views now because I added a background script or service worker. If I click, then it launched over here on my other browser or my other screen. When I say that the content script and the background scripts are separate contexts, it's not just this kind of like abstract idea of like, a Venn diagram that doesn't overlap. It's actually a separate instance of scripts, and they're running in separate application contexts. And so this is the DevTools for just a background script. And we can verify it says hello from the background. And if we look at elements, it shows nothing because it's technically, the background script is technically like a headless. If you can think about headless servers or a computer without a monitor, but still doing its job. So the background script is a headless script that has no ability to render anything to the screen or listen for events or anything. But it can, like I said, write to the local storage or communicate with the server and ping APIs and get data from the context and send it back and forth. So the background script is kind of like the brain, and then the content script is kind of like the presentation end or the UI that you actually see. Okay, so let's revisit the presentation, see if I missed any of the details. Oh yeah, so I mentioned that JSON requires a kind of strict syntax. You can visit JSON lint and paste your manifest in there if you're having trouble. I also linked to EFF, the Electronic Freedom Frontier Foundation, and it's a great website to know about and to subscribe to. But it's also a great website to test on. You can inspect anything and look in the console and make sure everything's running. And because they don't have a lot of other things running, the console is not overly polluted. Okay, so yeah, so we talked about how to debug an extension in the content script, and by right-clicking and inspect source. We talked about how to debug an extension in the background script by clicking on the service worker, and so we're ready for the next section. So what time do we start? I'm done at 7:40.
You have about 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. Perfect. This is the first time I'm giving this as a presentation. It's funny how different it is when you write a chapter in a book from giving it as a presentation. And I just kind of like, just tried to imagine, oh, what would Amy most appreciate? And so rather than like getting nitty gritty in the actual practice of the code, I try to like focus on the philosophy of browser extensions and how they're put together to enable her students to kind of like take up the idea and to run with it. Okay, so I have a giant assets folder, and you can click this zip and this link, and you can go and download all the assets for the project. This includes the images, the explosion images, and the animation scripts. And you just click download right there. And so yeah, so they're downloaded, and it's just a folder with JavaScripts and images, and so. Now I'm going to drag that into the folder that I've been working on, which I've somehow magically lost. There it is. Okay. And so now I've installed the assets in the project, and I can go back to the presentation and oops. And I unzipped the folder, I placed it inside of my project folder, and now my structure looks like this with assets and the 3 files I've created. And so, so now we're going to add a browser action. And as I mentioned before, the browser action it's a weird term, but it means that you're adding an icon plus the ability to click on that icon and show a pop-up. And so to do that, you just need an HTML page called action.html, and I'll do that right now. New file, action.html. I'll save that, and then this page instructs us to also add the icon that identifies the browser extension inside of the Chrome extension page. So if you copy and paste this block of code, which is the links to the icons and the action, which includes the action file we just mentioned, then you can put that in the manifest, making sure that we put commas where they belong, and save. And now I can go back to the browser extension, and I can refresh here. And now we can see we have a new icon. And now we can also see, if I click on the extensions button here, which is the puzzle piece, I can see my first browser extension has loaded, and I can pin it so that it always shows up here. And then I can click this, and I can see the HTML page I loaded. So yeah. So now we're going to add the library. So there are several files here. There's the anime.js and some other JavaScript files that I've created that support this project. And so we have to link out to those. We're going to link out to the CSS, and we're going to basically allow access to SVG files and MP3 files in the extension. So I'll paste that in there, and writing over the content scripts, and that should be good. I don't see any errors. So, and then cool. So now we can go and test. I have to refresh the extension, and go hit refresh, and I don't see any errors. So that's good news. I can click on here, and cool. So note that the HTML, which is really simple, also includes a bit of instruction here that says press E and a tilde to test. And so let's go to this page to do that. And I'm going to hit refresh so that it loads the most recent version of the extension that I've been working on. And it's E and a tilde. And tell that my sound is working. I can see that the anime.js script is working. And I can actually hit it multiple times. I remember when we did this when RBG died, and we just to deal with it, to just go and blow up. So, okay, so we've got a browser extension, and we've got the foreground and background contest, and we've got this script that does this thing. Like it says, if everything worked, then you know that everything is connected right, and you can actually write code to link to that animation. So the animation is made possible by the anime.js library. I mentioned that earlier. It is just so amazing. The documentation is so great. If you work in JavaScript and don't know about this, then you just got to go and spend some time, because this page is just amazing. The code that explodes the page is me, but it's fairly simple. It's basically just grab all of the elements on the page and transform all of their position, rotation, and scale using random numbers. It's fairly simple. In the chapter, I talked about more about that, but it's really just JavaScript, and it's, you can put that in any website, and it's not just extension specific. And yeah, so that concludes part 3. And I think that's a really good place to stop, not just because I'm out of time, but because I've kind of like shown the architecture of an extension and shown how all these pieces fit together. Once you kind of get it working and have that kind of workflow, when you know how these things fit together, you know how to add code and refresh everything, you're just building a website. At the end of the day, it's just a website that, like in that image that Joelle showed, it floats above all these other people's websites and allows you to do really interesting stuff, like blow up your own project, which is really fun. Oh, I was going to do it on cue, but it didn't work. I don't know why it's not working. Oh, I got to refresh on the page. There we go. It's a good conclusion right there.
All right. Thank you very much, Owen. Round of applause for Owen. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Well, yes, I can't wait to get my hands on this, because anything that explodes web pages, I want it. So, we'd like to invite the audience. First of all, thank you so much to Owen and Joelle, and we'll thank you again at the end. But we'd like to invite the audience to submit any questions in the Q&A feature, and I'll start us off. We have people with a range of backgrounds here, and I'm sure in many audiences that you've talked to, from people who have done web programming and have substantial CSE experience, to people who have maybe just done some P5.js, some processing. Maybe they've learned how to get the P5.js into JavaScript. They understand a little bit about the document object model, and they're wondering, okay, how do I make that next leap into getting outside of the P5.js window and really digging in, doing these extensions. So there's your tutorial, and I guess the cookbook does that. But what if they're missing some background, right? They haven't had that much experience with the DOM or with JavaScript in general. Are there some tutorials you can recommend? And in a related question, I find a lot of times when I'm learning a new skill and learning to program in some environment I've never done before, I find it helpful to find a project that's already working and take that code, or in this case, the whole project, and start editing it and understanding, oh, this is what this does, this is what that does, which seems like it might be really useful in this case because you've got several different components. You've got to remember what the manifest does in the background. So I wonder, can you recommend some resources or a plan of action for people who for whom this might seem overwhelming?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I have a lot of insight for your question as well, because I don't know how much of your audience knows this, but I was your TA for 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, and so I taught.
He was a great TA, everybody.
What's that?
I said he was a great TA, everybody.
Oh yeah, well, you were great to work for. I learned.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and so when I started working with you, I think you were using Director in class, maybe. Yeah. And then and I knew I had a background in Director, but I knew ActionScript, I knew JavaScript, and so we used Flash for a few years, and then Tim, my roommate, taught for you, and I guess you moved to processing eventually after that, and now you're in P5.js. Is that the kind of the history there?
Well, my group is still working in processing so that we can work with desktop and installation, but the class before ours is currently working in P5.js. So what we've done this time is we've mostly worked in processing, but some students are working back and forth. And we did a little bit of P5.js in preparation for your workshop to refresh everybody's memory on how does this actually work with regular JavaScript with HTML. But so students have worked in both of those, and some students have considerable experience outside of that, some don't.
Great. Oh,
Maybe
thanks.
some of the resources from Critical Web Design.
Yeah. So if you've been working in processing, then it's fairly easy to move to P5.js because you have the setup and the loop, and the kind of the world is the same, but you're technically you're already kind of moving into JavaScript. And
yeah, I think most students did P5.js in the class that comes before ours.
Yeah. And so one thing that I think is wonderful about processing is that it's super easy to jump in, and the demos are really great. You're going from just knowing absolutely nothing about programming to it's a very visual, language, and not the language, but the outcomes are very visual. You immediately get to rectangles and animations and things moving, and it's very fun. But to make that step to get kind of out of that, what I would call maybe a walled garden, is that you need to run JavaScript on the page, and I think that so there are a lot of places to go and find to learn about JavaScript. The W3 schools is just excellent. It's all free. You can find all the tutorials. What they do with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and their SVGs are really nice too, is that they kind of they curate it really well. And I'm looking at the all the books that I've taught from, and there's no reason to learn every HTML tag or CSS selector. There's no reason to learn. You just have to you just have to pay attention really good at the beginning so that you understand what it is that you're looking at. That this is an HTML tag, this is a selector, this is an attribute, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can start to apply that in other ways. So this would if you're talking linear learning, then I would suggest something like W3 Schools, which is, again, it's, they curate it really good. And so W3 Schools is also really great because you can run code in context, which is really nice, and you can go and test it out. And so that's really nice. So the next thing I would say is just get really good at keyboard shortcuts and opening the DevTools and looking at what other people do. When you say, gosh, that's cool, how did they do that? Oh, how did that thing move across the screen? What is that thing? Just right click on it. How did they make those rounded boxes? Just right click on it and inspect it, open the DevTools. And in this case, I can select that element, and I can come over here to the CSS, and I can say, I can search and I can say radius, and I can see here's the border radius on that box, and I can click it and turn that border radius on and off. I can come over here, I can play with the colors, and I can manipulate the entire page while it's live, and then I hit refresh and then it resets. But this kind of environment, I just love it so much. It's something I found in Unity too. You can run the game and come over here and manipulate variables. They're all serialized and live at the same time. They refresh automatically. It's really great as far as a learning tool goes. So yeah, so W3 Schools for kind of linear learning if you like books and you like to follow a path. DevTools if you're down to experiment and break things. And then I guess if I was going to pick the maybe a third path in, then I don't know what I would do. What's a third path? There's the style learner who likes to jump right in. There's the linear learner, and then there's I don't know. So if you like to see a finished project, get used to using Git and GitHub. This project is all on GitHub. You can pull examples really easily and run them really easily. And you can go and see what an extension looks like. You can read the manuals. Yeah. Let's look at some more questions, Amy. Yeah, take a class. I'm with you. Yeah, I didn't want to point to my class. The third path. This person says the third path to take a class. Oh, is that true? Oh, I see her. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I could. I'll paste the link. I'll paste the link later to my introductory class at Davidson College is called Critical Web Design. And it's basically like full stack front end, everything from design to design ethics and responsive web design to JavaScript and the command line and SSH and yeah, the web the whole like web front end is just there are just so many moving parts and it seems to move really quickly, and if you go and follow a tutorial that's like how to be a React developer in 5 minutes, then it doesn't really teach you anything. It tells you how to follow somebody else's tutorial to build somebody else's software. And so I think the first philosophy is just like, be in control of your learning, like look at the root technology so that you understand what you're putting together. Because following somebody else's tutorial,
Well, I don't see any other Q&A in the chat, so I'll just keep asking questions, and possibly other questions will come in. So the DevTools, do you want to show that? Because I know you went through it, but maybe a little bit quickly, and it's only. Is Chrome the best place to do this? I always wonder this too, because I have used it in Chrome, and then I wonder if this would work better in a different browser, or is Am I better off sticking with Chrome?
Yeah. So yeah, the W3 schools are really good because you can, I'm not sure if you can browse and find it. Probably easier just to Google. Let's see, browser market share. And to answer that question, StatCounter collects it, Wikipedia collects it. I think W3 Schools collects it somewhere. Maybe they're not on page 1. But if you look at the browser market share across the world, what you're going to find is, and so if we're talking about extensions, we're talking about desktop. But what you're going to find is that the Chrome is the biggest. And when you start to consider other options, so Chrome, Brave, Microsoft Edge, which you can download and install on your Mac, Opera, those are all basically Chrome. All the keystrokes that I just demonstrated, the dev tools that I've been showing, those all work the same because it's all Chrome. It's like saying Ubuntu versus Debian. They're all just different flavors of the same basic platform. And so Firefox is technically different, but Firefox has its own dev tools, and they look pretty close to the same. And so this is like week 1 in my class, and like let's talk about browsers, because 70% of our students come into class with Macs, and the Mac walled garden, encourages them to use Safari, which is very low on the list in terms of the types of browsers that other people are using. And so if you're going to build a website, you should test that website in the same browser that other people are going to be using, so that they see the same thing and they experience the same thing. And so I just tell all of my students to use a Chromium browser, because that's just going to be the most common. And so Chromium has won the browser war just because it's of the open source project Chromium. So that said, I think there's a lot more to say about the DevTools. And so if you inspect any page, and you can also do Command Option I on the Mac, Command Option J will open up the console, and you can dive right into the elements of the console. But you can also see a lot of other cool stuff. So let's say you're on a website, and let's say you go to Instagram, and I'm just gonna demonstrate. I'm gonna do all my favorite like how to hack the web with DevTools stuff. Okay, so let's say you're on Instagram and you're like, that guy Owen Mundy has the coolest bike pictures, and then you try to right click on it and save it, and you can't, because they just assume most people don't know how to use DevTools, and they're right. And so what they've done is they've just put a blank HTML element over that image so that you can't open it up. But you can inspect the page and look through the source code, and you can find out where that image is actually sitting and go and find the file itself. And in this case, it didn't take long, because here it is. I can find a almost 1080p version of that image and pop it open, and here's the actual file, and I can copy and save that file, right? And so I did that by looking through the elements. You could also do that looking through the next tab, which is called Sources. And when you refresh a page with Sources open, you can watch the files that are loaded, and you can look through the different images that come up, and see basically an index of all the stuff. Oh, and here's Instagram's manifest file. And you can see all the files that the libraries they use, and you can access the content. And if I keep moving, I'm gonna find that file. It's gonna be somewhere. It's gonna be somewhere in here. There's that image. And so, and this is again, that raster image, the data that actually makes up that file that they've hidden underneath the interface. So that's the sources, and you can also do all kinds of other things with the sources. The network is pretty cool because when you refresh the page and watch the network in, you get something called the waterfall, which is over here. The network is really good for performance stuff. And so I'll refresh it again. And it's called a waterfall because you can see how they, as content is loaded in, it kind of cascades. And this piece is loaded, and then the next piece is loaded, and you can start to see and identify performance issues on a website. But you can also access again the content. One of my favorite demos is to talk about the 404, which is the classic file not found. So every time you access a web page, you're pulling in all of these different files, and all of these files are they're on different servers, and you can go and use the terminal, and and you can go and ping ucsd.edu, and I'm sending data out, it's returning data back, it's telling me how many milliseconds it takes to get from Davidson, North Carolina to wherever San Diego, California, UC is saving their data. But the browser is doing all this in real time with all these different files, and then building them all into a page and rendering them all in real time and making it interactive. It's kind of amazing, really, the internet. And so in the network, you can see something called, you can see not only the file and the path and the file name, but you can see the headers, which are the request headers when the file request is made. In this case, the browser is saying, can I have this file? And then the server is saying, yeah, you can. And here's how long it's been cached. And the browser knows that the status code is 200, which is green. If I look at these red ones, these were blocked somehow. And there's some kind of problem with that. But so this is where a 404 would show up. I'm going to talk about one more thing, is the application. And this is where cookies are stored. And so here I can click on cookies. I can see all the data that the website is storing. I can see that that they've got this list of cookies, and each of these cookies has its own values. Each of these are basically unique identification strings to try to identify me and my traffic across different websites, so that they can set up remarketing opportunities and sell the potential to manipulate my behavior. David Leon, one of the big experts in surveillance culture, says that the first step to manipulating your behavior with surveillance is identification, and this number right here is that process. And but you also have to realize that cookies are good in some instances, because without the cookie, it wouldn't remember that I was logged in. And without local storage, Tally wouldn't work, because we use local storage to save that information. So there's a lot more in the dev tools that I could nerd out about, but I'm getting signals that says maybe that question is answered in way too much.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Owen and Joelle. That was awesome. And just wanted to mention that we should be wrapping this session up soon, but we have like an overtime session for people in my class where you can talk directly with Owen and Joelle. We'll be hopping over to the class soon. But I did want to wrap up the public session by thanking you for just kind of showing us how to take apart the web, because we often talk about the first step in being empowered, even though I don't really like that word so much, but being able to move forward with developing our own media and confronting and thinking critically about what's out there is to be able to understand it and not think about it as something that's a black box, right? So once we can open it up, it becomes less intimidating, right? It becomes something that we can play with. And I also thought it was great that you talked about cookies can be good. Cookie Monster told us this years ago, but we've become used to the idea of, oh no, cookies, tracking cookies, turn them off. And you're pointing out, well, in this case, we're using them for our game. So any of these technologies are not inherently good or bad. There's no essentialist argument for a particular technology, but it's how they're used and kind of thinking critically and understanding them, and being able to create them yourself. So thank you again so much. I want to also thank everybody at Qualcomm Institute. I'm flipping back to the old name, Qualcomm Institute and Gallery QI for putting this event together. Trish, Max, Ruben, Megan, everybody on the Gallery QI team. Thank you so much, everybody, for putting this together. And thanks to everybody who participated, everybody in the audience. And once again, thanks for presenting this, Owen and Joelle. All right, big round of applause.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks, everyone, for inviting us.